Yeah.
Welcome to the Weather Insights Podcast. I'm your host, meteorologist Scott Pitney, along with meteorologist Jeff Lindner. Hey, Jeff.
Hey, how are you doing, Scott?
I'm doing good. Yourself?
Yeah, it's good. It's good.
Yeah, it's hot.
It's yeah, it's hot.
Yeah, to timestamp this, by the way, this is our first podcast. It's going to be a short podcast, around 30 minutes or so, just to kind of talk a little bit about the show content, what you can expect on future shows, maybe a little bit more about Jeff and myself. We'll have our bios on the website, but a little bit more kind of off the bio stuff, and then we'll talk some weather. So we are recording this first show on Thursday, July 27, 2023, about 4:15 p.m. And even though we're based in Houston, we're going to be talking about weather really all over the world. So thanks for joining. And Jeff, I know you're a Texas A&M graduate meteorologist.
That's typically when I get the whoop.
Whoop! I went to A&M too. Initially it started to be a meteorologist, but life went another direction. So I had to circle back. Now I'm at Mississippi State. So I guess that makes us somewhat rival SEC.
Absolutely, yes.
Do you even care about
We'll
that?
see if A&M can pull it off this year.
Okay. So, like I said, our bios are going to be on the website, but let's start with what got you involved with the weather. How did your love of weather develop, or do you even love weather?
It's interesting when you ask that question after you've been doing it for 20 years.
Yeah. Right.
I don't have a story. Everybody, all these meteorologists out there got a story.
Yeah.
Hurricane Donna hit my house, or a tornado hit my house, or there was this great big nor'easter that snowed me in for
That's
a week
popular
and a half.
one, the 1993.
Yeah. The superstorm of 93
Sure.
or whatever.
Yeah.
I don't have one. I don't know. I've just always been interested in it. And then it was a interest that became a job. Yeah.
Gotcha.
And so when it's kind of interesting when your interest becomes your job, because then you got to find a new interest.
Yeah, it's no longer a hobby. It's fun when it's a hobby.
Yeah,
there's no pressure, right?
Right,
You just got to do it, and you're probably pretty good at it because there's no pressure. Then all of a sudden, people start paying you, and the expectations, go up, and poof, you start, well.
And weather is forecasting, and weather and all of that, and communicating weather is so much different today than it was when I started. Yeah. And when I started, it was TV 3 times a day, morning, noon ish, evening, dinner, and then evening, late, 10 o'clock. And the internet was just starting around, and email was just starting, and we didn't even have cell phones really. And so you got your weather information at those times of the day from the TV. Now, I know there's still a segment of the population that still gets their weather that way, but most of us get our information from cell phones and those apps. I'm sure we're going to talk about at some point on your cell phone. If you've been in Houston looking at your weather app on your phone, it hadn't been too great lately.
Yeah, very boring.
And so, but it's just so different in a small amount of time that I've been doing this, of how much change, and really it's not so much the forecasting, especially on days like today. It's hot, it's humid, there's a 20% chance of storms. You can rubber stamp that in Houston in the summer for a lot of the days, but it becomes more the communication of the forecast, especially when bad things are going to happen, when we have some sort of weather event. It becomes that, how do you communicate it? How do you say it in a way? How do you write it in a way to get people to take the appropriate action that you're hoping they're going to take? And a lot of forecasting is going in that direction now. It's getting pretty hard, the longer range, beyond 5-6 days, to beat the national model blend. So that's the, when I say national model blend, that's all the models put together, kind of averaged, and you get this blend of them, and that goes out, I don't know, 10 days or whatever.
How much was discussed, or how many classes did you take on numeric forecasting when you
I
were in
had
school?
one, and it didn't really talk about models. It talked about everything that goes into modeling. All the
Equations?
equations, the differential equations, the physics, and that was a lot of the coursework at A&M was theory, dynamics, thermodynamics. Obviously the math and the physics, but actual operational forecasting was very little.
Yeah. Well, guess what? It's not much different in Mississippi State. No, I have one numeric, and same thing, equations, plug the numbers in, kind of understand where it comes from, and a few things about different types of models and what they're good for and not good for and all that. But yeah, it really hadn't changed as far as what they're teaching.
Yeah, at some point there's going to have to be some, and I don't know what the coursework is at universities. I've been out for a long time now, but what the coursework is when it comes to operational forecasting, broadcast forecasting. I know Mississippi State's more into the broadcast side of stuff, and then also the communication side, and I think that's the big thing going forward in the weather is communicating this stuff. We're technical scientist type people, and we don't always do the best job sometimes communicating um, outside of that technical box.
Yeah.
Like you and I could sit here and have a conversation about CAPE and helicity and all these big fancy terms. Well, most people out there don't have any clue what that means or how it affects them,
Or they don't care.
and
Yeah.
and that's really important, and it's especially important when you have something bad going on.
Yeah. And I think, we share the same vision for this podcast. Yeah, we're going to have our meteorologists and climate people on and that kind of stuff and talk the science, but we're going to have the end users of weather, the people that weather affects their daily lives, their professions. They really rely on accurate forecast and understanding it. People in construction, um,
Aviation.
agriculture. I was talking to one of my good friends, fishing guides, and kind of telling her about the show and really kind of pitching it to her because she'll be a great guest. But but yeah, she said that she would love to come and talk about the weather. But anyway, so yeah, I think that what you said about communication. The other thing too with cell phones, there's so many forecasters out there now, and they love to tell you
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
some of them aren't bad. I mean, they're weather nerds. They don't have a meteorology degree, but they have a good understanding, and especially in their particular area or area of expertise, whatever they want to. But yeah, I imagine it's changed quite a bit since you got out of school.
Man, that's only been 20 years ago.
Yeah.
Can you imagine what this is going to be in 20 years from now?
What will it be?
I don't know. I don't know how much of a human component there'll be to it.
Yeah. You think AI is going to take over and we're going to lose our jobs?
Well, I've been told that I've read through that the answer to that is no. But honestly, on days like today where it's so straightforward,
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know how much I can add on a day like today.
Yeah.
You
Well,
know?
it's in convective storms anyway. I think the good analogy is throwing popcorn in a pan with oil, turn it on, and tell me which kernel's going to pop first.
Right. Right.
And when.
And where.
And where. Yeah. So, well, I do have kind of one of those childhood stories.
Oh, do you?
I'm going to age myself a little bit.
Well, let's hear it.
So I got a little weather station. It had the anemometer was a flap that had markings, and you kind of when the wind blew, it told you how fast it was blowing. I had a sling cyclometer, and one of those backyard kits, and they got it for me because I just got excited when a storm came through. But then I guess my earliest memory was in 1970 when Celia was threatening the Texas coastline. And my dad, was a geophysicist, so he had a drafting table with grid paper and all that. And he goes, "I'm going to show you we're going to make a hurricane tracking chart."
Mm-hmm.
And drew the longitude and latitude, and and that, when the news came on and gave the coordinates, to me, that was fun. That was like opening a gift. I mean, you couldn't wait for the news to come on to see which way the hurricane was going. And so it started there. But when I got, funny story. So when I got the kit, at whatever age I was, 7 or 8, back in the late 60s, it came with a blue book, and it was a really nice weather book. It had glossy pages in it, and I learned about the cloud types. It was a really good book, especially for clouds. When I got to A&M in whatever it was, 83 or 4, and took my first weather class, guess what the textbook was?
The same thing.
So I aced that class, man, because I started studying, when I was 7 or 8. But anyway, life went a different direction for me, and then I circled back and got my meteorology degree later on, and checked that box. But anyway, so here we are on the podcast. Shall we jump into some weather?
Sure.
All right. Man, did you ever think you would see a recorded sea surface temperature of 100 plus degrees?
That's the pool water out there in your backyard, right now.
That's what I kept my hot tub at 100. It's crazy.
So this is
hotter than that. 101.1. That's it. I don't know if I'm saying this right. Is it Manatee Bay?
Yeah.
Near Everglades National Park. 101, according to a park spokesperson. And then this is from NPR.org. Jeff Baradelli, Florida WFLA News Channel 8's chief meteorologist, climate specialist, told CNBC that the water around this particular sensor in the bay is murky and contaminated with sediment, quote unquote, and that water temperatures are reflective of the fact that darker surfaces absorb more heat.
Yeah.
Low albedo.
Yeah, it's it was I don't know, when did this happen? Monday, Wednesday?
Monday.
Monday. Yeah, it was a big deal on social media on Monday. And if you look at some of the other sensors down there, they were 98, 99. So, I don't doubt that the water was 101 or whatever at that particular sensor. But, that area is just south of the Everglades. It's very shallow water. You're talking 3, 4, 5 feet deep, I think. Like the quote there mentioned, there's a lot of seagrass down in there and that type of stuff that helps absorb the solar radiation that comes in. And so if you look at, most people aren't looking at the water at the temperature gauges down there, but if you look at them, they fluctuate quite a bit.
Yeah.
I mean, nighttime they get down to 86, 87, 88, and they're back up to the upper 90s. And in some cases, they're even hotter than the land temperatures because of all of that dark surface that the sunlight is hitting, and the darker surfaces absorb that solar radiation. And so, there obviously it's going to be looked into, and all this is taken into account. I think the current world record is in Kuwait Bay, in much deeper water, which qualifies a lot more, if you will. And so this is going to be looked at and studied and determined if A and B or apples and apples are really being compared here, because if you're talking about a sensor in Kuwait Bay that's in much deeper water, it's a lot harder to warm deeper water than 3 or 4 or 5 feet of water.
Sure.
And so, and it's interesting because let's see, this was Monday, you said. And we're Thursday, and I think that same temperature, there's like 83 now because they've had rain and clouds over the last day or so. And so you can see huge swings in these water temperatures in these shallow waters. I think Galveston is 89.
Yeah.
89 or 90, which is very warm for us. Again, that's either at Pleasure Pier or Pier 21. And, again, that's the shallow water, but you go to the buoy 20 east of Galveston and the water temperature is more 85, 86, which is more representative of the Gulf as a whole than those near shore and shallow bay waters.
Yeah. Well, despite that 101 peak, South Florida's been, their water's been in the 90s. And another interesting note, Miami-Dade County, which has been under heat advisories or excessive heat warnings for 22 days straight, according to the National Weather Service. The previous record was 3 days.
Yeah. But you got to be careful with that, because I think, if I'm not mistaken, I read somewhere that WFO Miami did change their criteria for excessive heat warnings, and they lowered it a little bit, and so that has resulted in the more frequent issuance, if you will, of some of those products down in South Florida. I don't know exactly how much is the difference, how many degrees it changed or lowered, but I think there was some modification in the thresholds there for those advisories.
Yeah. Well, it's easy. This kind of weather makes it easy to forget that just a short time ago we had a polar plunge.
We did. When you talk about short time, like, we talking?
Well, when was the polar plunge here in Texas? That was 21.
The Great Winter Storm.
Yeah, whatever you want to call it.
Well, we're not going to call it Uri,
Okay.
like everybody else does. No, February.
Yeah, it was the day after Valentine's,
Yeah,
February
February
15th,
of
21.
21.
Yeah. That was the first time, being in Texas all my life, I think that was the first time I've ever seen every single county under a winter storm warning.
Yeah.
And that includes Brownsville,
Yeah.
which is the same latitude pretty much as
Well,
Miami. I mean, give or take.
In modern times, absolutely. I'm sure in 1899 and 1895,
Yeah.
we would have, if the products would have been there, they would have,
Right.
But while we're on the sea surface temperature, let's pull up that
Yeah.
sea surface temperature map of the Atlantic, and it's just not southern Florida that is warm, and when you look at the sea surface temperature anomalies, so above average or below average of what you would be on today across the Atlantic basin, there's a lot of warm water from the coast of Africa into the Caribbean, into the Gulf of Mexico, up the U.S. East Coast, really warm off the Northeast U.S. And Southeast Canada, Atlantic Canada. Very warm conditions up there, and that's really a function of this kind of blocking high pressure we've had over Eastern Canada and Greenland in the month of July.
Yeah.
And so kind of the same, you kind of can get in these patterns in the summertime where it's the same thing over and over again. And so that's how you get the flooding in the Northeast and Vermont and those areas. They're on that kind of trough, if you will, on the west side of the big blocking high. And anytime you get these big blocking highs, there's not a lot of wind. And so the water calms down. You don't mix the water very much. You don't extract heat from the water, from the wind. And you can get these anomalies, and that's been very similar down in South Florida. It's been relatively calm down there too. The easterly trades have been very weak this year, and so it's allowed the Atlantic and a lot of warmth in the Atlantic. So we'll see what that means for the hurricane season. At the same time, we have this El Nino very clearly showing up here off the coast of South America, extending out to south of Hawaii, and that typically produces a good bit of wind shear, especially in the Caribbean and portions of the southern Atlantic basin during the hurricane season. But I mean, my goodness, these water temperatures out there are some of the warmest we've ever seen in modern times. And we think back to 2017, very, very warm water, very active hurricane season. And these water temperatures are equal, if not a little bit warmer than that. And so it'll be interesting to see what happens here over the next month or two. Does the warm water win out and we get a bunch of storms, or does that, you still have the hot water, but does that wind shear from El Nino keep the storms from forming? And
what's your call on that one?
I think El Nino's going to win out.
Do you? I'm going with sea surface temperature.
I just,
just to be difficult and
course.
competitive. If we agree on everything, then the show won't be interesting.
Of course not. We want friction and controversy, right?
Yeah. So by our fifth or sixth show, we should be throwing things at each other.
But no, and my thing is, well, this is what I'll say: the Gulf of Mexico every year is warm. It's nothing for the Gulf to be 80, 85, 88 every summer, but we don't always get big hurricanes in the Gulf. Because there's more that plays into it. There's atmospheric things that play into it. There's dry air, there's moist air, there's wind shear, all this stuff. You have to get the waves in the right place and conditions have to be right. And so it takes a lot to actually get a storm to form.
Yeah.
They're very fragile. We saw that with 9.5L, the tropical wave that was coming across the Atlantic.
70% at one time.
Yeah. And did nothing.
Did nothing.
And so we'll see. I may be totally wrong. It may be a super active you know, portion here in the next 2 months, and I'll see you in October.
Yeah.
Um, or it may not be. We'll see. We'll see what happens here. It'll be interesting because there's not a lot of similar previous years, what we call analogs. There's just not a lot of them out there with this type of El Nino coming on in such a warm Atlantic.
Yeah. And of course, that was definitely an anomaly having two storms form in this part of the southern basin in the month of June.
Yeah.
First time that's ever happened. So I understand this high is going to break down a little bit. And the storm, in fact, the one that's out there right now with 40% chance of development, it has a track that is going now a little bit more north. I think this trough that's up here is going to have an effect, synoptic effect, and break down this high a little bit on the western side.
And if you notice that there's a blue patch of water of cooler than normal sea surface temperatures.
Right there?
Yeah, just south of Greenland, I don't know, several hundred miles or so.
Yeah.
And that's our old friend Don. Tropical storm Don became a hurricane, very high latitude tropical storm hurricane, and just kind of sat in that same area, spinning, moving around, doing loops and stuff. And you can see it cooled the water temperatures down. And so these tropical storms and hurricanes actually do have an impact of carrying that heat northward into the higher latitudes and away from the equator. And you can see there, that's what they do. They churn up the water and cool it down.
Well, it sat there for so long, there was probably a lot of upwelling. And, that water's really, it's all warm out there, but that's a cooler area, probably deep down too. So, that makes sense. Interesting. Speaking of the tropics, you want to take a look at let's
pull up the IR.
All right. IR. Let's see.
That's infrared for all the other folks out there.
Right. I wonder if I can just do that. Can I do that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. So courtesy of Tropical Tidbits, by the way. What are you seeing here? Well, it's Go 16. We went IR because the sun's starting to set.
Yeah.
And
I don't see anything overly concerning anywhere. There's a lot of colors, if you will, there around Cuba and South Florida. That's all a function of an upper level low pressure system. And so in the tropics, we're looking for stuff down at the surface, down where we live, not in the upper levels. And so that it looks scary and all that, but there's not a whole lot there.
Yeah.
And then you have this big old elongated, spiderly looking kind of tropical wave right there in the central tropical, deep tropical Atlantic, roughly between the Caribbean and the coast of Africa. And that's the one that some of the models are showing developing as it gets a little bit further north and conditions become favorable. You can't really tell in the IR, but there's a big plume of Saharan dry air coming off of Africa moving west. We call that the Saharan air layer, or more I don't know, appropriately commonly called the dust, but it's really the dry air that has some dust in it. And it's that dry air that kind of beats down these tropical waves. And that's what it's doing to that one right there. But as it gets further west, we may see some potential there for some development north of the Caribbean. And we got 95L down there south of Jamaica still chugging along.
Yeah. You said, speaking of the Saharan dust, when we were chatting a few days ago, you said something interesting. We used to call it the hot, lazy, hazy days of summer.
Yeah, it's always been
the hazy
around.
part was
Yeah.
It's just got a name now.
Yeah, well, of course it's got to name everything nowadays,
Right.
And it's got to be complicated,
Yeah.
But no,
even low pressure systems on land. In the wintertime they have to have a name.
Yeah, and so the Saharan air masses and the dust that accompanies it, I can't even talk.
Accompanies?
Yes, sir. Has always been around. We've always dealt with this stuff, especially here and in Florida in June and July especially. By about the second week of August, this tends to die down and go away, and that's lo and behold when our hurricane season tends to pick up. On average, and there's you kind of look at this as like, oh well, now that makes sense, and oh okay, it's all sort of connected out there.
Yeah, for sure. All right, where are we going next? Let's see. We have an update outlook, something 7 day. Oh, okay. We were just talking about. Let's see what Can I get the deets on this? No, it's just going to give me the 40%. Oh, there we go. Tropical wave located a couple hundred miles to the southwest of Cabo Verde Islands. Conditions are expected to be favorable for gradual development of this system later this week and into the weekend while it moves west to west northwest. So a little bit of change of direction there. You can see the path. They've been heading to the Leeward Islands, but that's that. I think that's that high weakening a little bit on the west side. 0 for 48 hours, 30%. Now I thought it was I think it was 40 at one time. Maybe it dropped. Maybe this is. Oh wait, hold on. Let me refresh this.
That's right. That's today too.
Probably a hurricane by now. No, just kidding. Yeah. Okay. 40%. There you go. I thought. Yeah, that was yesterday. So yeah, there it is. Right, and kind of in the middle of all that.
It's just out there to kind of, if this is how the season's gonna go, I'm perfectly fine with this.
Yeah.
They can all stay out.
Yeah.
Out there, and most of these waves like this that form out in this area, they don't come this far west. They don't affect Texas.
Right.
Most of our systems that impact Texas form are actually in the Gulf of Mexico.
Yeah.
And occasionally we'll get the long trackers, your Allens, your Gilberts, your Ritas, your Ikes, that you have 7, 10, 12 days to get ready for.
Yeah.
But the majority of the time, these things form in the Gulf and hit land within 60 hours or so.
Yeah. And El Nino's kind of cranking up now, so those trade winds are going to continue increasing from El Nino, making it more difficult for them to enter the Caribbean. So, yeah, so we'll keep an eye on it. There was a brief period, a few hours that I opened this up, and there were 3 yellow X's on here.
Yeah,
I think it was Tuesday or something like that, a couple of days ago. So I thought, wow, okay, now it's starting to get going, but then poof, just like that, nothing.
And we'll see here. We'll see if this is able to. I think the Hurricane Center is being a little bit conservative, probably, just based on what happened with 95L,
right?
And the fact that there is some factors this has to overcome. There's dry air out there this is gonna have to overcome. But the models are starting to latch onto it more, and it's not just. I think it was previously just the GFS. Now the European and the Canadian and their ensemble members are starting to show development there northeast of the islands, and so I think we'll probably get something out of this. We'll probably get a name, and and I'll leave it at that because I'm not trying to record something that to come back in 2 weeks and say
you said,
yeah,
and
exactly.
I've got it right here,
yes.
And
yeah.
So here's something about weak El Nino, moderate El Nino seasons, strong seasons. It's been pretty well known, strong El Ninos that, we've had some of our worst hurricanes in the least number, where the numbers weren't that strong.
For Texas? Or just in general?
Just in general.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah. So,
we've had some big ones.
Yeah. So there were 12 storms, 2002 and 1951, 8 hurricanes in 1951, and 3 plus hurricanes, 1963 to 1951. This is what I should have read first. What if we examine, let's see, who gets the credit on this? Weather.com. What if we examine only the moderate to strong El Nino seasons, given the current El Nino strengths? Those 11 such moderate to strong El Nino seasons averaged 9 storms, 4 hurricanes, 1 or 2 that reached at least category 3 intensity. So we can get the strong ones, but not the numbers.
We can. The question, did we have a warm Atlantic? Or as warm as we see this year? That's really the wild card here.
I don't think we've had it on record that we've had it this warm in the Atlantic with this combination of El Nino and warm Atlantic and all that.
So that's going to be some of the key. But I will say two big El Nino years that stood out with huge impacts was 1983. Of course, that was the year we had Hurricane Alicia. I think we had something like 4 or 5 storms that year. A nothing year.
Yeah.
But we had Alicia form in the Gulf in August. And of course impacted us here locally. And then 1992, another relatively quiet year, big El Nino year, and we had Hurricane Andrew.
Yeah.
In South Florida. And so, there's so much talk, and I get asked this question all the time. Well, how's it looking this year? What are you thinking? And everybody wants the numbers, and oh well, that sounds like a lot. 20 sounds like a lot, and 4 doesn't sound like much, and blah 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 blah. It doesn't matter. The numbers really don't matter. What matters if you get impacted.
It's the one coming at
It's
you.
it's the
That's
one
yeah.
that hits you.
Yeah.
And for us here in Houston and along the Gulf Coast, we know it doesn't have to be a hurricane. I mean, a tropical storm can cause us all kinds of trouble.
Two of our worst: Allison, 2001, and of course Harvey, 17.
Yeah, Imelda, 19.
Imelda, yeah.
That formed, 5 miles off the coast.
Claudette, 79.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it doesn't have to be your big hurricanes, and it doesn't have to be a big season. I mean, we had the most active season ever in 2020.
Yeah.
And we had one storm hit the Texas coast, Hannah.
Yeah.
So, of course, it was horrible in Louisiana.
Yeah.
But we were very, very fortunate.
Yeah. 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 I was in Alicia.
Yes, sir. 40 years coming up.
Yeah.
40-year anniversary of Hurricane Alicia.
1883.
Yes, sir. I was 2.
Yeah. So I remember that one well. I was watching Doug Johnson on Channel 2, and the 10 o'clock weather. I remember they were showing the leading cloud bands on radar, or convection bands. But we went outside, my dad and I, and we just looked at this defining smooth line of cloud. I mean, it was very eerie looking. And then that thing came rolling through. And, if you watch film, of course, there's lots of film and stuff on hurricanes. It's one of those things that just don't even get close to doing it justice until you're in one. You think about severe thunderstorms. We've all been through those, 58 mile an hour winds plus. We had one just last month, the one that we recorded 92 mile an hour, or 97, excuse me, at Georgia. And, here I think I had one of those gusts like 60 miles an hour. Now, those just last a few seconds in a severe thunderstorm.
Right, yeah.
Now, imagine that sustained for hours, 70, 80 miles an hour. It was scary. It was exciting for me because I was a weather nut.
And you were in Alicia, where is it, Spring Branch?
Yeah, about a mile from here.
Okay, in Spring Branch.
Yeah.
So that's, you're inland. What are we inland? 65 miles, maybe?
Something
60,
like
50,
that. Yes.
50, 60 miles inland.
Yeah. So it did weaken, obviously, but still 60, 70 mile an hour winds just sustained, may have been up to 80. And this is like at 2 o'clock in the morning. It's pitch black and it's just loud as can be. And I'm watching the neighbor's pine tree just bending toward our house, just wondering if that thing's going to come out of the ground and go flying through the window or something. And then the eye came over. Now, the sun had come up by the time the eye came over, and it wasn't the classic eyes you hear about with the clear blue sky and the seagulls flying around. It was pretty messy. It was cloudy, but the wind did calm down instantly. And then it didn't last very long. I can't quite remember, but I want to say it was like 30, 45 minutes, and then it kicked up again. And then the backside of the storm was very short. Now that was a pretty quick moving storm, so we didn't get a lot of rain with it. I think we got less than 10 inches of rain, something like that. But yeah, but the worst part about it is the power outage. We were out for 5 days, and that just damp, nasty. You talk about humid. It is so bad after a hurricane, and sitting there, I remember I was trying to sleep on the couch, and I woke up, I think it was like 2 a.m. I was just drenched in sweat.
Oh yeah.
And the neighbor across the street, he had his generator going. And this is 1983, so it's not one of those quiet generators, and the dew's dripping down his window and the TV's on. He's the only one on the street. The street's pitch black, and I had enough. So I grabbed a bottle of shampoo. I got on my bike. I rode to a nearby apartment. I hopped the fence, jumped in their pool, and basically took a bath in their pool. Yeah. And I felt good for about 5 seconds. Got on my bike. By the time I got home, I was sweating again. Yeah. So, post hurricane is not fun.
We haven't dealt with anything like that here in a long time, because Ike was mid-September, and we were really fortunate that when Ike passed through, we had a good push of dry air that came in behind it. And that's it. That's the only big tropical event we've had with wind and power issues in the last 40 years here. Really, if you look at Alicia and Ike, and Ike was, for most people, a really strong tropical storm.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. Everybody east of it. Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
We haven't dealt with that. I can tell you, I did the storm surge surveys over in Louisiana in 2020 with the National Weather Service and some folks, and Laura was an August hurricane, big fast moving Cat 4 hurricane in the southwest Louisiana, and I can tell you it was horrible down there with the heat. I mean, you have all that soggy ground.
Yeah.
Of course, it's more coastal there than it is here, but
right.
You got that old storm surge water left inland, and it's just baking in the mid 90-degree dew points in the upper 70s. And sometimes there's not a lot of wind after a hurricane. The pressure gradient kind of goes to nothing, and it was awful. It was awful. I can't imagine people doing that long. In this time of year, in the heat and humidity, without power. I don't see it.
And I think about those poor folks in 1900 in Galveston. They didn't have electricity anyway.
No, and so it might not have been that big of a deal.
Now I think about at least as far as the heat. But to be stuck on that island, probably no running water.
They had a lot of other big issues, but
major, yeah.
Nowadays we're just, you lose that power, and within 15-20 minutes, when's it coming back on?
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't. You lose your electronics, you lose your cell phone, of course your AC, and it's just you're just.
But being through Alicia 5 days without power, and I was with 5 days without power for the what did you call it? I call it the polar plunge. That one.
The winter storm.
The winter storm.
Plunge.
I'll take the winter storm without power.
Yeah, I don't know. I get the luxury of having to be with the generator at Transtar, and so we had power. So I've never been without it for Ike or without it for the winter storm. Now, for Ike, I think my parents, they live up on the north side, up around Spring. They were without power for, I think it was 15 or 16 days. That's a challenge. And like for the winter storm, of course, everybody lost it, my house included. And so my wife and kids were at home, and I think, I don't know. I kind of like to ask some opinions on that. Which one would you?
Very good survey.
Survey. Would you rather lose power in the winter or in the summer? And I think most people are going to say in the winter, but remember, when it's 20 degrees outside, it's 38, 42 in your house.
Right.
So,
hey, this is a good time to bring up the email address. So I'm glad you said that. You'd like to know. So here's how you can tell us. You can email us. We actually have two email addresses. We have a long one that I think is easier to remember. weatherinsightspodcast.com, weatherinsightspodcast, and this will be on the website, weatherinsightspodcast.com, and then weather-insights.com. Yeah. So email us and tell us what you prefer. 5 days without power in the summer, or 5 days without power in the winter. Do you want to do outlooks for August? Dare we do that? My outlook for July that I did on TV was just totally blown. I forecasted wetter and cooler. I was just going over. I was going with the
CPC.
Yeah. Well, that's what I get. That's what I get for being lazy.
CPC forecast. That's the Climate Prediction Center.
Right.
So they do the monthly outlooks for precipitation and temperature, and they we're showing above average rainfall in Texas for the month of July, and I think they kind of had a good idea. We were a little bit wet around the 4th of July for some places, and then that ridge of high pressure kind of built back in, and that was into that. I can tell you the temperature outlook without even looking at it. It's going to be above average, I bet. Oh, look at
For
that.
everybody, unless you're having a monsoon.
Yeah. So El Paso maybe.
Oh, yeah, look at El Paso. Boy, they've been setting some records. Yeah, they've been over 100 degrees for like, what, 3 years now or something?
That's that's yeah. If that dome and heat ridge sits up where those, is this for the month of August or what do we? Yeah, it's for the whole
Yeah,
month. Okay.
August 20.
I mean, that's a.
Oh, wait a minute. What is this? That's 2022. Where did I get this? Disregard this.
Well, I was okay. I mean,
it's kind of.
It looks like it could be right.
It's kind of accurate. It's kind of accurate. Well, let's see. I can probably find one. Let's see.
I mean, I can promise you the temperature is going to be above average, and the rain's probably going to be, I don't know, maybe on the coast, maybe a little bit closer to average, but I bet inland Texas, central Texas, North Texas, there's probably not a lot of hope of. I don't know if the August outlook's out. Oh yeah.
There we go.
Yeah.
All right. So let me share it again.
Kinda.
Oops, not the radar. All right. So here we go. That was 22. Now a year later, 23.
Yeah. Well, there you go. Hot. And hey, at least it's not below average.
Yeah.
Rain. It's just kind of near normal, if you will. And August can be, I don't know what our average is in August, maybe 3 or 4 inches of rain locally here.
Sounds about right.
So
I think July was 4.15 or something. So probably a little less, I would think, than July. Right?
I think August is more.
Oh, it is?
I think we start ticking up after July. But hey, if we got 2 inches of rain or 3 inches, I'd be happy. So
yeah, absolutely. I think everybody would.
I'll take anything at this point.
We did get some rain though the first week of July, but that's been it. So,
and interestingly, look at that. This has been a big thing this summer, that below average there in the Midwest. They've had a really mild summer in the Midwest. That's from the Dakotas down to Iowa and southern Minnesota and Illinois. It's been a relatively mild summer. All the heat has really been focused in the Southwest U.S. and then down in the Southern Plains and then across Florida. So kind of the southern areas, which it is hot in the southern areas in summer, but this year it's been really hot.
Yeah.
Speaking of heat, I think we were going to talk a little bit about how hot it's been in Houston.
Yeah.
With we mentioned earlier about Miami and the issuance of heat advisories and excessive heat warnings. And the weather service here, our local weather service office, kind of looked into this. And I think we've had 19 straight days this summer with a heat advisory for Southeast Texas. And that seems to be a record, if you will. Now, the tracking of heat advisories and excessive heat warnings and all that only goes back to 2006, so it's not like it's a really good record here, or a really good period of record. But it does include the summer of 2011. And when I think of horrible summer heat, I don't think it's going to take a lot to beat 2011. And so I actually did some research at email, and kind of, how many days have we hit 100? Because it's so hot. I hear this all the time. And so far this year, I think we've only hit 100 7 times. So seven days we've been 100 or above at Intercontinental. Back in 2011, it was at 11. So if you compare 2011 and 2023, we're not that far off. I mean, we're within 4 days of 2011, but the difference is this is when 2011, starting around August, this is when 2011 went down here. We went 31 straight days in August of 100 plus. So every single day in the month of August in 2011 was over 100, including 109 on the 27th. And so I don't see that kind of heat coming in August for us. So I still think 2011 is going to be, for most of us in modern times, that benchmark summer. Of course, you also have 1980 to throw in there. 1988, those are big heat years.
Yeah.
But it's like, well, why are we having so many heat advisories and excessive heat warnings? The difference between 2011 and 2023 has been the air has been holding more moisture longer. And what I mean by that is the dew point, how much moisture is in the air in the afternoon hours, typically falls. And so we get, like they'll get into, 69, 73 range. That's still humid. You're still going to sweat when you go outside. But this summer in June and July, the dew points have been hovering around 80. And that's just, ugh.
Yeah.
That's that your windows are fogged up type stuff.
And your lows are only getting down to 80, 82 at night.
Yeah. And that's been pushing those heat index values up above the criteria for us here locally. It's 108 for an advisory, 113 for excessive heat warning. And we've been hitting that every afternoon. So we've had these advisories and warnings. Interestingly enough, we've seen that pull back here recently in the last couple of days. The dew points, I looked today, the dew point was 70 this afternoon.
Yeah. And the lows are in the mid 70s.
Yeah. And so we've had a little bit more drier air.
Yep.
Mixing out. And it's still, we're still getting 98, 99, 100-ish in the afternoon, 97. So it's still about the same temperature, but those heat index values aren't hitting those thresholds like they were.
Yeah.
So that's a positive. We're heading in the right direction.
Yeah.
Fall is right around the corner.
Right around the corner. October's going to be here before you know it. Still dangerous though. Even though there's not a heat advisory, you can get heat exhaustion. So
I can't really tell the difference between 94 and 97 when I'm on my yard.
No.
I can't.
They're both miserable.
And I can't really tell the difference between a 99 heat index and a 110 heat index.
Yeah.
It's horrible. It's just horrible.
Yeah.
Now what does make a difference is a breeze.
Yeah.
To me.
Yeah.
And I can have an afternoon at 100 degrees and a 20 mile an hour wind, and to me it's not that bad.
Yeah, if you're in the shade. Yeah. We had that. I want to say is a week and a half or so, maybe 2 weeks ago, where in the evening, right around sunset, the breeze would pick up really nice, like 15 or so.
Yeah,
that was nice.
And we're moving in this direction, and I don't even really want to open this whole can of worms right now, but man, why not? We're slowly starting to move away from heat index into what we call wet bulb globe temperature. That's a big one. And heat index is just temperature and humidity, and you put them together and you get a number. But there's other factors. Is the wind blowing? Are you in the shade? Are you sitting there? Are you doing something that's, you're exercising, or you're mowing the yard, or you're laying concrete, or whatever.
Yeah.
Whatever, you're doing some type of physical activity. All of that makes a difference.
Yeah. Or are you in the city? If you got radiation released from the ground, or are you out in the country where, it's not getting absorbed as much. And
so we're getting better at and see, this is back to that communication we talked about. How are we communicating what it really is? Because right now we boil it down to a simple. It's a number.
Yeah.
And if it's above this number, we get an advisory and all this. We tell you don't, limit be careful out there. Yeah. But there's a lot of other factors, of course, that go into this. And I assume at some point we're going to do the same thing with wind chill, right? Yeah. Because standing outside at 45 degrees on a sunny day with a 10 mile an hour wind is way different than 45 degrees on a cloudy day with a 20 mile an hour wind.
Right.
Yeah.
And
anybody who goes to sports events, outdoor stadiums, football in the wintertime can attest to that, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And height too. Yeah. What's your altitude? What's blocking the wind? What's not? Different areas. If you're flat and there's nothing blocking the wind, it's going to make a difference. So that could be area related too. Interesting stuff. Yeah, it's no matter how far we get, it can be improved. So sometimes the wheels turn slow there. At least we're saying, dew point is so much better than saying relative humidity, since relative humidity is of course temperature dependent. Right. So there have been definitely some positive strides. toward that and communication. But yeah, it's big. So I look forward to hearing from these guests that we have on that are out there depending on weather for their living and what their takes are on all this. What else we got? Is that it? Is that a wrap? Show 1?
How long have we been going?
Long enough. We'll find out.
Long enough.
We'll find out.
Long enough.
Yeah, I don't know if we have any analytics to see how long. You know, we'll be able to see how many and who, not who, but how many listen and that type of thing. But for
I mean, we could sit here and talk all day and night. We could probably
Yeah.
do 4 or 5 of these.
Yeah.
And just bam, bam, bam. But
Right. Yeah, but look, let's leave a little for the next podcast.
Yeah.
Plus, we have a barbecue to get to.
we got a barbecue to get to. Yeah, we got to go stand out in the heat around the barbecue pit.
Yeah. Speaking of heat,
Sounds fun.
Yeah, that's another variable. You know, are you by a barbecue?
Are you
pit?
by a barbecue?
Yeah. All right, that's fun. We'll do it again. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
On Weather Insights.
Yes, thank you. On Weather Insights. I'm Scott Pitney. He's Jeff Linder. Have a good one.